Welcome to another episode of Sabine's Common Sense. I'm your host, Sabine, the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. And thank you for helping me be on purpose. So today we're going to talk about the 15-year saga that is James Brown's estate that still hasn't been settled. But there's like a lot of tea going on in this story. So trust me, it's not the same old thing, right? And then I get the pleasure of talking to my good friend David Germaine. He is a real estate broker and insurance broker, just like my friend Ashley, but he has a very interesting story. Like, seriously, his life is a whole movie. So he's going to let us know all the different moving parts, and you guys are going to be like, wow. Wow. But it's good. It's on topic. So stay tuned for that, right? All right, so what are we talking about with James Brown's estate? It's been going on for 15 years. He died back in 2006. And for those of you who don't know James Brown, he was the Godfather of soul. He had songs like, I Feel Good. He definitely heard that one. Or you might have heard, This Is a Man's World. All right, I won't sing. But yes, the Godfather of Soul, so many hits. He died with over $100 million in his estate. And everyone, obviously, just like a lot of the stars that you know, everyone and their mother comes out, saying that they're an heir or that they're related to the person or what have you. What's interesting about James Brown is that he did have a will. He had a will, but his will was not clear, right? So now we're going to get into the nuances of when you do plan, like that, the fact that it has to be a good plan. You know what I'm saying? So he died in 2006. He was 83. Died in 73. He died in South Carolina. So this is where his probate is going on, right? It's going to happen in the state where the person passed away, and whatever the laws and situation is there, is what is going to be. And so his will wasn't updated. Apparently, allegedly, he was married to this woman called, what was her name? Tommy Ray Heine, right? That was her name. And apparently he was married to her. She happened to be one of his backup singers. And they got married back in 2001. But there's like question as to whether they were still married or whether they had gotten divorced, right? So we'll get into that. They had a child called James Brown II, right? But there was a question within his estate as to whether or not this was still his wife, whether or not this kid was his child. And he has 9 other children outside of, this situation, right? So his other children was like, nope, it's not gonna happen. Like, no, they're actually not related. And there was this whole big fight. 15 years, we're still talking about this, right? And so the son actually had to take 2 DNA tests to prove that he was actually the son. And so now, supposedly, the courts are saying, okay, that was his wife, and yes, this is his son, right? But there's a lot of tea in this story. So the tea is, so she was his backup singer. Apparently, what was discovered in this whole court process is that she was married at the time when they got married. So the question is, well, if she was married, then how could they actually legitimately be married? So apparently her husband, who was, I guess, Pakistani, it came out that he had 3 wives back in Pakistan when he married her. And so when he married her, then apparently his marriage to her was not valid, right? Because he was already married. So there's that. That was a whole thing that they had to sort of discover and pull out. So she had annulled the marriage with him in 2004. He told her that he was just marrying her for citizenship and was like, deuces. So that ended. But the court had to figure this out. They had to basically piece all of this together to figure out, what exactly happened. So the other thing that's going on is that his 9 children brought a lawsuit against this probate to say, like, okay, they're not doing things honest with the copyright. Because when you have these stars who have like these complicated assets such as music and trademarks and copyrights and things like that, they're hard to sort of value. And there's also a lot of sort of red tape around them to make sure that they get passed down, right? So you have to be really specific and really intentional when you are leaving these type of assets. That's why I always ask people, do you have trademarks? Do you have copyrights? Do you have intellectual property? Because these are things that sort of get really tricky. So it seemed like the family sort of got mad because they didn't want Heine to be considered his wife, because as you know, or as I've talked about before, you cannot disinherit your spouse, right? So if you create a plan and you do not leave something for your spouse, then the law says that your spouse can come in and claim their elective share. An elective share is really like their right by law that they get from your estate. Different states have different sort of breakdowns on what that elective share is. So in South Carolina, they say that she gets 50%. So if she is considered the wife, she gets 50%. And of course, that leaves less for the 9 or 10 children now to split up. So they don't want her to be considered the wife. But the courts say that she is. So what that means is they're still kind of mad about that. They're doing an appeal to basically try to invalidate that. But they're sort of coming at it at another angle. They're saying, no, she made some deals with respect to his copyrights, and it's not right. And so what the copyright issue is that back in the day when there were all these artists, especially artists of color, who were getting these deals with these major, label houses and things like that, they would give up their rights, as we know, right? They didn't really have claim to the copyright. They didn't even know it was a thing that they should want, right? So they gave up their rights to their copyrights. But the law recognized this. Copyright is federal law. So the federal government recognized this, and they put this thing in place called termination rights. So 35 years after someone, I think it was 35 years after the time that they had created the law, that there was an option for the families or the individuals who should have had the copyrights to buy back or terminate the copyright that the label house had, or whoever owns it essentially at the time. They can terminate that, and so that means the family gets it back and they can exploit it in whatever way that they want. And so that's what the children, the 9 other children, are saying, like, no, she made a side deal to the tune of $2 million to not cancel the termination rights or not take back those copyrights, right? And she got her cut. And so the estate will now just get royalties. But if she gets most of the estate, she basically cut them out, right? Because you know how the vultures come and they're like, hey, kids, why don't you sell your copyrights, your termination rights to us so that we can get, we can now exploit it, right? So that's what was happening. But because she cut this side deal, now the kids can't go and make that money that they could have made, right? Even though everyone should be looking for the royalties, but you know how it is. Everybody wants a big payday. So all in all, there's a lot going on in this estate, right? A lot. So I wanted to sort of talk about the solutions, right, that he could have done. Like, I like to give you all these solutions to these complicated things. So the first thing that he could have done was update his will, right? So he could have updated his will. His will did not include the wife, and his will did not include the child, the additional child. I don't know about the other 9 kids, but in any event, if your will doesn't say that you actually want to exclude people, you're actually not leaving people out of this, then you are leaving it open for the courts to now say, because when you do a will only, right? We're talking about doing a will only, you have to take that to court, and the court then directs everyone to walk things out. But when you do that, the courts, they have to let everybody and their mother know that this will is being probated, right? And now people can come in and contest it. They could say, no, I don't think that's right. I think there was some mistake. I think, that, I was supposed to be included in this, things like that. And so that's exactly what happened. So now that they opened up this probate 15 years ago, because there was so much confusion with what he actually wanted, now they're sort of trying to gain clarity. So had he updated it more recent to his death, then they would have known for sure what he actually meant. And had he actually said, listen, I am disinheriting my 11 kids, or, whichever ones that he was disinheriting. He couldn't disinherit the wife, had to leave her something. But if he didn't leave her anything, it would have still ended up in at least a similar situation to what's going on now. But an update would have been amazing. And it should say, again, who he's excluding, who he is disinheriting. It's not good enough to just have the document. You have to really be clear so that could be, it could go according to what he wants. And what's sad is that in his will, he actually created what's called a testamentary trust, which I'm not a fan of. I know sometimes people do it for tax purposes, but I think it's better to pay the taxes than to deal with something like this. But in any event, that's just me. What do I know? So he did a testamentary trust. So that means his will says, when I pass away, I want the courts essentially to create a trust, and I want most of my estate, which should have been like 75% of his estate, to go into this trust. It's called a charitable trust. And with that charitable trust, I want to provide scholarships and music opportunities to underserved people in South Carolina and Georgia, right? So that's what he wanted to do. 15 years later, this has not happened. Why? Because of everything that I just told you guys about, right? So it's really super annoying to me that happened. When he could have created a trust during his lifetime, he could have put a trustee in place. And if the situation with his wife would have arisen, then the trustee could have worked something out, maybe sell some assets, maybe gift her something so that she could sort of get this, if that's what he wanted, or if she was actually his wife. Because there was also a question as to whether or not they got divorced. It's too much. It's really too much. That's why it's 15 years later, right? So moral of the story is, don't just get any plan. Someone called me like recently and said they were trying to reach me. They left a message with my firm. We got on a call. By the time I spoke to them, they were like, oh, I needed a trust. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's talk about, what you need. And the person was like, oh, I went online and found one. And I was like, okay. But the reason why there are professionals that create these things is because, one, you don't know if it's going to work until you're dead, right? And two, they get a bit complicated. So that's not the type of thing that you want to just be so sort of careless with, right? You want to make sure that it's something that's strong and that it's solid. You want to make sure that it's updated. You want to make sure that you talk about these different things that could kind of happen, and you want to make sure the person that's creating it is asking you these different scenarios, making you think about things that you may not have thought of on your own. Anyways, that's the story. So now I'm going to get into interview with David Germaine. He's going to let us know all about his journey, and we talk about everything. We talk about real estate, we talk about insurance, we talk about death, we talk about getting a windfall, just all kinds of things. So come on, follow me, let's go talk to David. Welcome, David. Mr. David Germain in the house.
Hi. How you doing, Sabine?
Good. It's such a pleasure to have you here with me. Or virtually here with me.
Well, this is the way of the new world today, right?
Exactly.
Because you gotta change. Only constant things change, so you gotta adapt to the change.
Absolutely. But it's good because it sort of takes down the borders, and now you can be everywhere you want to be, right?
Correct. No borders, man. No flights, no in traffic. This is great. I love this.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know David Germain, he's a really good friend of mine. He has such a great story. When I first met David, he basically, the reason why we ended up becoming friends, like he told me his story. That was like my introduction. It's such a powerful story that, every time I hear him tell it, I really think more people need to sort of hear it because there's so many lessons involved in that. On top of him having a great story, he's also an insurance broker. He's also a real estate broker owner. And he, I don't want to call you a millionaire if you don't want people to know, but he's successful. Don't tell anybody. So David, again, thank you for being here.
Thank you. To God be the glory. Thank you.
Amen to that.
For having me.
Yeah. So let's start with just talking about where you're from. I know you're from a great city, so everybody likes to talk about. Tell me about it.
Well, where I'm from is I'm not of this world. Where I'm from, I'm a child of God, first and foremost.
Wonderful.
But where I'm born here on this planet, on earth, I am from Brooklyn, New York. right?
Yes,
East Flatbush,
Brooklyn.
big old to my East Flatbush people. All right. And I come from, my mother's from Jamaica and my father's from Haiti. So
Okay.
I'm a melting pot, just like New York.
100%, 100%. And so I know you had like many sort of different chapters of your life. Where did it all start for you? In your professional
Wow.
life. Mm-hmm.
So where did it all start? Well, growing up in old Brooklyn, not the new Brooklyn that people know today.
Mm-hmm.
When New York City, like when you see Sugar Hill Gang, broken glass everywhere, people pissing on the corners like they just don't care. Like when you think about like that video, if you ever watch that video
Mm-hmm.
of the Sugar Hill Gang,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, wow, that's what New York City really looked like
Wow.
back when I was growing up, you know, and they were talking about their communities. And, it's interesting when you grow up in that environment, um, you know, when you see New Jack City or
Mm-hmm.
Juice, and it's just like, wow, you grow up thinking you have to be a certain way,
Right.
you see the drug dealers with the nice cars and the flashy jewels, and your environment really can shape you if you allow it, for good,
Mm-hmm.
bad, or indifferent.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up in that environment, like my mother was an immigrant, and just like most immigrants who come here, they want a better life. And, people only come to America for two reasons: for freedom and opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And, she came here, met my father, who was drafted into the war.
Oh,
He
wow.
was a Vietnam War veteran. And just think about that. Like, he was drafted. He had no choice.
Wow.
There was a real draft,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that draft basically made him go to the military, in the army, go fight a war that he probably didn't want to fight, but
Mm-hmm. It wasn't for
he had to
him.
go.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back from the war, with so many veterans who come back from the war, he suffered post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And coming back to New York, when you hear gunshots, and automatically he'll put on a helmet and really think that he's out in war. But you know what? When
Wow.
when I think about it now, growing to this day, we really was in a war.
Right in the
Growing
middle
up
of
in the
it.
hood was really a war, So I see that, and I kind of feel like the military took my dad, because
Mm-hmm.
I used to be mad at him because he was an absent father, right? Because of the mental issues that he was dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
which, thank God, you got to think about back then, dealing with mental issues back then was not sexy or wasn't
Yeah.
prevalent what it is today,
Right. There was no support,
and
no respect for it. Mm-hmm.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
So he came back, and just like a lot of veterans who came back from the war, they didn't come back to a country or a city that respected them,
Mm-hmm.
or even employed them.
Mm-hmm.
Because the unemployment rate back in the 70s, I was born in 1976. So I was actually the 200-year anniversary of America.
Wow. 76?
1776.
Wow.
And I was born in 1976. So I'm looking at that timeline. If you think about where the 70s were,
Mm-hmm.
and hyperinflation, like I look at a lot of documents to see what New York was like. And yeah, man, New York was really, I don't know, back then, and they really called it Crooklyn, and
Yeah.
they called it, do or die, for real.
Right. So how did you as a young Black man growing up in Brooklyn, how did things change for you? How come you didn't end up in the streets, or, being a product of the environment that you were in, especially with your father not being around?
I say it's only one person, because that question I even asked myself.
Mm.
I remember growing up, there was a guy, and I don't even know if I should say his name, but he was a big drug dealer. And I remember,
Definitely don't say his name.
The first, yeah. And he was one of the biggest ones in the hood at the time. And I remember he bought this is when Lexus just came out in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the first one with the SC430. And anybody who knows Lexus knows what I'm talking about. That's the same car that they actually murdered Michael Jordan's father for.
Oh,
They
really?
killed him on the side of the highway because that car was so nice at the
Expensive.
time. Right. And, you know, he was the first one. That's like the equivalent of somebody having a Bentley or a Rolls Royce in today's time back then.
Got it.
And he had the drop top convertible. And, you know, I remember he had came up to me because, you know, they're constantly trying to recruit people to go into their illegal organization. Right?
They're hiring.
And
yeah.
He was like, you know what? You got a face that nobody will look like, you know, you got that innocent face. Whatever that meant. He said, you got that innocent face. And he's like, you know, I want you to do a delivery for me and just bring something from where he's at, uptown to Manhattan. And I remember he said, I'll pay you for it. My mother didn't know this at the time, you know, and just to let you know, like, how close I came into that drug game, if you want to put it that way. And you got to understand, I'm 18 years old. And here it is, or 16 years old, sorry. And this drug dealer's offering me $5,000 to just drop off a package.
Wow. And this was in the 80s? When was this?
This is in the 80s, 90s.
90s.
You know, when I was growing up. And I remember contemplating, I went home and I'm just thinking, I'm contemplating about the money and, you know, what I could do with it. And then the other side, that's the one side of my brain. The other side of my brain is thinking about my mother and what she would think and say if she was to find out if I would have done this, you know. And thank God this side of the brain worked out more than the other. I was scared to death of my mother and what she would think of me, and I turned them down. And the next day, kid you not, because he was one of the big drug dealers and he dominated so many corners. The rival drug dealers who wanted to get some of his corners basically shot him and his girlfriend. Point blank range in his drop top Lexus SC430 car. And I said, wow, can you imagine if I was
that ain't a lesson.
Go down? That was a huge lesson. One of many lessons that I learned. And I said, that's not for me, you know?
Yeah. So what did you do instead? Like, where did this take you?
So growing up back then, you know, my mother, who was on welfare and food stamps, she couldn't really buy me anything, you know, because she went from a 2-income household to now my father, who was the breadwinner. Because, you know, even though women's rights were coming into the 70s and the 80s, it was still coming out of the 60s kind of mindset where the woman stayed at home and the men worked. So now she's forced to be in the workplace because my dad, who came back from the military, he can't provide. So you're in survival mode. And I remember I had to go out and be a man early, where I had to pack bags and packing. Man, I remember those days packing bags in the supermarket. I used to make $50 to $100 a day just packing bags.
Dang, that's good.
Listen, those deliveries and them old ladies that can't bring those bags up the stairs, right? Listen, you made a lot of money doing those deliveries back then, you know, because there was no Uber and there was no, you know, what is that, Fresh Direct and all these other things now. So they depended on people like myself to help them.
Who knew?
So I know, right?
So, but at some point you became an educator.
Yeah. So how that happened, I was in high school. I went to George Wingate High School right there in Brooklyn. Man, that high school was rough, man. Now that I think about it, back in the 90s, it was. And I went there, and I remember my math teacher, Mr. Brody. I will never forget him. So I'm always good at math. For some reason, I was excellent at math. I'm a numbers guy. And people used to cheat off of me, sit next to me in class and literally cheat because they couldn't understand the math problems and the concepts, right? So I was able, because I'm from the same environments they're from, and I know how to speak their language, I was able to talk to them in ways. I said, well, think about percentages like buying a pair of Jordans, right? So you buy a pair of Jordans, at that time, they were only $100, right? And you had 20% off, right? You know, it would be $80, you know? So I had to show them in ways, or talk to them in ways that the teacher was not able to communicate that language with. So the teacher saw this and saw how they were getting it. And after class, my math teacher said, "Hey, David, would you like to be a math tutor?" He said, "How about you getting paid for that?"
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, "Getting paid for this?" You know, it wasn't cool to be smart back then.
Right,
you know?
right. Yeah.
You know, so it was not cool to be smart. And when he said that, he was like, "Yeah, they'll pay you." At that time, minimum wage was, I think, man, what was it, like $5?
Probably $5 or $4 something.
But you gotta understand, I was hungry back then. Nobody was giving me any money.
Right.
Right. So I said, "Okay, I'll do it."
Yeah.
And next thing you know, I ended up tutoring the basketball team at the school, because the basketball team, the players needed to be eligible in order to exactly. And that's how I was able to get my little props or be in the in crowd, because I was able to make the basketball players eligible to play, and we was able to win the championship. We actually won the championship, I think, twice when I was there, and we made it to the playoffs every year.
Wow.
And so ironic that led me into education, because I didn't think that was going to happen, but that was the foundational piece that led me into becoming a paraprofessional teacher's assistant, working for the Board of Ed, because I really liked it, because I helped them, you know, and that's when I started learning about service, because my mother was a teacher as well. And I think when you help others get what they want, I don't know how the feeling, but you just feel good.
It's a wonderful
inside. Yeah.
So
that's how I became an educator. And then I did that for 15 years.
15 years. I didn't realize you did that long.
15 years. Yeah, man. Because I really when you love what you do, it really and truly does not feel like work. Right? I really love educating. And to this day, I still love to educate. But the only difference now, educate about things like this, assets and liabilities.
Right.
You know?
Shout out to Earn Your Leisure.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Earn Your Leisure, man. And Wall Street Trapper and all the guys, you yourself. So thank you for paving the way, because I wish you guys were around when I was in school.
Right?
Man, there was nobody teaching us about this stuff.
Exactly. How did you transition from teaching to then you ended up in the real estate game?
Wow, great question. So one day I'm at my job, and I remember it was 2010, if I can remember. I think the Haiti earthquake happened.
Okay.
And, you know, shout out to all my Haitians, you know, sac passe.
Sac passe.
And I remember how I was feeling. I was feeling down. And yes, I'd never been to Haiti, and my father's from Haiti, and you know, I wanted to leave. So it's funny, that same day my mom got into a car accident.
Oh, wow.
Right? And I don't know what was out. I don't know if the death angel was out, or, you know, whatever was going on. So I get a call on my phone, just like this, and it was my mom. And my mom said, "David, I'm in the hospital right now." Man, my heart dropped. My heart dropped. So I said, "Are you okay?" "I'm gonna be there right now, but this is during work hours."
Okay.
So now I come into work early. I stay late. I do more than what I'm even paid to do.
Right.
I would see other employers come in who didn't look like me.
You mean employees?
And say, employees,
yeah,
sorry.
That's
You're
correct.
right. Thank you for the correction. Employees who don't look like me, who would say, "My daughter is sick, you know, I need to go leave," or "I have a dentist appointment." So I thought, if I leave, no big deal.
Right.
This is my first time, you know, ever leaving off the job. That's to show you how much I love working on the job. And because it was a Friday and it was raining and other teachers called out, so they were short-staffed, my boss said, "David, unfortunately, David, I can't let you leave right now, because if you remember what it was like when you were in school and the main teacher is there, so when a substitute teacher comes in, how do the kids act?"
Crazy.
They don't have no respect for the substitute, and they go crazy.
Yeah.
So my boss was being selfish and thinking about her position in the job and how I would make sure that the kids are okay. But my mother's sick.
Right.
My mom's in the hospital. Show some compassion. And, you know, she said, I can't let you leave. And I said, I'm going to say it. It's Bloomberg, right? Do you have a mother? What happens if your mom was in an accident right now? Would you stay on this job? And she said, you know, unfortunately, we have protocol. I said, protocol? Okay, here's my protocol. I said, you could either A, write me up, or B, dock my pay. But I'm leaving right now, right? And I had to take that stance, like, protocol?
Yeah, what you mean?
Protocol? What do you mean by that? So I said, you know, I'm leaving. And then as I turn my back and I leave, she says, okay, David, okay, we'll find somebody to replace you. But I said, you know, the late, great Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you say. People even forget what you do. But people would never forget how you make them feel.
Right.
And I remember how I felt that day, where I felt like I was a slave, I was a prisoner, where I couldn't even go out to go see my own mother. I said, I only have one mother. I could always get another job, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember from that day on, that's when I said, I'm gonna take my talents somewhere else. And you know what? I didn't feel good about the job anymore. Because prior to that, I loved it. But after that, I hated the job. And then I started not caring and taking extra long lunch breaks and coming in later. And I just didn't care. I'm being honest. And then they said, David, we no longer need your services. And that's when I said, all right, I'm not going to work for anybody again. I'm going to take my talents and that's when I met a guy in the barbershop. It's funny, I'm getting my hair cut and he was sharp and he's driving a nice car. And I said, hey man, what are you doing? Because I know him.
Oh, okay.
And he wasn't driving and having that. He didn't make money like
different.
that before. I said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm in real estate. I said, really? And he said, yeah, you can go get your license. So pretty much that's how that whole journey started after that. And unfortunately, my mom got sick with cancer.
Sorry to
it's
hear.
funny because, yeah, the thing about it is kind of like I was in real estate without even realizing
that you were
I was in real estate.
Okay, how was that?
Because when I was younger, I got hit by a car.
Okay.
And thank God I don't look like what I've been through, right? I have a steel plate right here in my chin to this day.
Really?
Sometimes I think when I walk to the metal detector, you know, I'm thinking it's going to set it off or something, right? But I got a settlement from that, right? And it was about $100,000. I couldn't touch the money until I was 18 years old.
Okay.
So it was a joint account because, you know, when you have minor.
Yeah.
And when I turned 18, man, Sabine, you couldn't tell me nothing. I'm just letting you know, like, you know.
This was after you passed up the drug dealing position?
Yes. Right? Because, you know, when you don't have much and now all of a sudden you get a lump sum of money and nobody teaches you about assets or liabilities. Yeah. And the only models or role models I had were the drug dealers and the people who got the respect in the streets.
Right.
So I thought that's the way you gotta be.
So what'd you buy, David?
Oh man. So we taking it back to 93, right? You had the Acura Legend. And the two hottest cars back then was the Acura Legend and the Nissan Maximas back then, right? It was the 4-door sports car when it first came out. So I ended up getting the Nissan Maxima, and next thing you know, I'm buying the rims. Next thing you know, I'm buying the TVs and the system. Hood rich, right? Putting all this money into a car, right? You can hear me coming down the block, my system coming down the block. I can't believe I did that too, because I would have some big headaches after that.
I always wonder, why do people do that? I'm like, what does that do for your life?
You know what? When you hear that bass, Sabine, like, Man, that beat, man, that you hear it in your chest.
Yes,
You know,
you
it's like
feel it
going to
in
the
your chest
club.
too.
Man, so
Yeah.
those are the young and dumb days, you know. But
So how much was your settlement?
100,000.
Oh, okay. So you was pretty
So I got
much
a hundred
running
k.
through it, huh? After that.
I blew $90,000 in 4 months.
Oh my God.
I mean, I have to laugh at it now,
Yeah.
thank God, but I was dumb back then. That was stupid.
But your story
That
is
was
like so
really
many others. Like so many people get into accidents, not on purpose for the most part, and get huge settlements, and then it's gone just like that.
because nobody teaches us about money,
Right.
right?
And
And
patience.
then I'm and that
Mm-hmm.
and I'm down to my last 10,000. And here's the crazy thing, right? So my mom
Mm-hmm.
sees me now with this new car with the rims and the system. All of a sudden, I'm getting all this fake love. People who
Yeah.
didn't know me before, all of a sudden now they know me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember that Mike Jones song? Back then you didn't know me. Now I'm hot. They all
You know
love me.
me,
You
yep.
know that crazy. So all of a sudden now, I'm getting all this unwanted attention,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm down to my last 10,000. And I actually wanted to go buy more clothes. So my mother said, "Boy, that money was supposed to be used. We still live in a 2-bedroom apartment,
Mm-hmm.
right?" And she said that money was supposed to be used for either to buy a house
Mm-hmm.
or college.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasn't thinking about
None of
college
that.
or a house at that time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about today, and that's the problem in our communities, that we only think for today. We're not thinking about tomorrow,
Right.
right? But I understand too that life is short, but you got to have certain things set up so you can live a better today or tomorrow. You want your assets paying for your liabilities, right?
Absolutely.
So thank God my mom took that 10,000 and she used it for FHA. She forcefully took it.
Mm. She was like, you gonna come up off this 10,000, David.
That's exactly what she said. That's exactly what she said. And I thank God for every day, because that little $10,000 investment,
Mm-hmm.
right, was able to get an FHA home to buy a 2-family house
Mm-hmm.
back in 1993 for $130,000.
Wow.
That was enough for the deposit, the down payment, and the closing.
Wow.
And I'm just like, wow, who would have thought?
Mm-hmm.
Park Slope, Brooklyn, 130,000. But
Park
nobody
Slope.
thought.
If you guys know
You
Park
know?
Slope, it's a multi-million-dollar neighborhood right now.
Now.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody knew that back then.
Right.
Just like nobody knew in Bed-Stuy, those properties would be going for millions today.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I knew what I knew now, that's the problem. That's the difference between rich and poor,
Right.
is knowledge.
Information.
Right? If I
yep.
knew what I knew right now, I would have bought 10 of those properties back then.
With the 100K, right?
Man, listen, I would have been sitting pretty,
Mm-hmm.
right? But, you know, hindsight is always 2020,
Right.
and I thank God for that one, because that one still led to 5 other properties. And, you know, it's interesting because remember the journey of me being in high school, learning to be a teacher, and then working in the system,
Right.
in the educational system for 15 years, me getting into real estate after my mom, the situation with the job,
Yeah.
me working. It's funny how God works in mysterious ways, because he led me into real estate, because when my mother passed away, and here we don't talk about asset planning.
Right.
My mother passed away from breast cancer in 2011. And next thing you know, I inherit 5 properties.
Wow.
Now everybody's gonna say, well, yeah, you lucky, that's cool. It wasn't cool. And here's why. Because
wait, before you get into that,
yes, ma'am.
Did she take money from the first property to acquire these other 5 properties?
Oh yeah, she took the equity out and was able to
Awesome.
acquire other multiple. Yeah, man. I mean,
Ooh, Mama's a
my mother
genius.
she was a yeah.
She didn't stop
Mama
at
Germaine,
one.
man.
Praise God for her.
Thank you, Mom. I appreciate you every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So continue. So you get the 5 properties, unfortunate in an unfortunate, way.
So she gets breast cancer, and the thing about when you sign a 30-year mortgage, do you anticipate when you get a 30-year mortgage that you're going to get sick? Do you anticipate getting cancer? Do you anticipate getting a stroke, heart attack, or any of these things? Do you anticipate dying, right? During those, because 30 years is a long time.
Very long time.
Right? So now the thing is, intentions are good, right? And I remember somebody saying the road to hell was paved with good intentions, right? But what my mother didn't know, as an immigrant coming to this country, just like a lot of people, it's easy to acquire things here, but it's harder to maintain and protect it. So here it is now, she left the property for her and her 3 kids, meaning I'm the oldest of 3. But do you think I was prepared at that time to pay for 5 mortgages?
Wow.
Pay for 5 property taxes, pay for 5 insurance, homeowners insurance, 5 water bills.
Right.
Just think about the burden. Every blessing carries a burden.
Right.
And I did not know how strong my mother's shoulders were carrying all of that.
Yeah.
Until she left this earth and went to heaven.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow. So now I got to take the torch.
Were the,
and now,
sorry, were the properties cash flowing?
So no, we weren't this. So great question. My mother wasn't thinking like an investor.
This, right?
You understand? She was thinking like the average homeowner who buys a house to live in and wants to buy it for her kids and her family. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, the only property is ironic because that the only property that was cash flowing wasn't even in the country. It was in Jamaica. So I'm like, of all the properties, we have that one. Why not, the ones in New York? But we were living in those properties.
Okay.
I wasn't thinking like an investor. She did not have that investor mindset.
Right.
You understand?
So it almost happened by accident. She was probably following her intuition, but she didn't realize what was happening.
Correct. And, when she did pass away, unfortunately, she didn't have a will.
Yeah.
And she tried to draft one, like a paper one. I don't know what my mother was thinking, or she just didn't know it, because you got to understand.
Right.
Nobody talks about these things at the dinner table.
Right. It's just,
we don't talk about these with death and sickness and, talking about the homes and like parents, we got to talk to our kids about, because now when that situation happened, I got to look, when my mother was sick in the hospital and when she passed away, I thought when she had a cell phone bill, I thought when, I told the mortgage company and I said, hey, my mother just passed away. We had a funeral. I thought they would say, okay, it's all right.
Yeah.
We're not going to send you any more bills.
Right. I know what you mean.
I learned the hard way that they didn't care. They said, I'm sorry for your loss, but now we're going to send the bill to your mom's estate. And I said, oh,
that's how
so that means we still got to pay? That's how it works. Right. And I learned that the hard way. I said, oh, okay. So now I got to work to make sure that the sacrifices that my mother paid doesn't go into foreclosure.
Right. And
that we don't lose those properties. And let me tell you, that was the most stressful time of my life because I'm not only dealing with the emotional stress of watching my mother deteriorate and right in front of me, I'm also dealing with the burden of the financials.
Right.
And then when I look back now, my mother's medical bills were like $450,000 with all the chemo treatments, all the chemo, all the cancer treatments that she had, the radiation. I mean, it was, thank God she had good health insurance.
Right.
I always thought about this because I even did this. I looked up, and you can all Google this. Anybody don't believe me? The number one reason why people file for bankruptcy in this country is because of medical bills. Medical bills. I did not know that, and this is why, which kind of segueing a little bit into where I'm going now.
Today.
Right.
So,
Because I personally experienced
okay,
the
so
life insurance part.
yeah, we're definitely gonna get to that. Before we move into that, how were you able to save the properties, or did you have to sell them? Like, what was the outcome of
So
that?
this is where I had to think
Mm,
because, like you said, we were living in the properties. Because I got into real estate, I realized, wait a minute, I can't live in the property and make any money.
mm-hmm.
So it doesn't even make any sense for me to live in this property anymore. And plus, the memories of my mom was killing me, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know what? I'm going to move out because economically, and then I rented out my first floor for, can you imagine, a 1 bedroom for $4,000 a month?
Dang.
That's what I was saying. This is what people were paying.
Oh
But
my
I
goodness.
guarantee you, people were paying me $4,000 a month for my 1 bedroom in Park Slope, and then upstairs, which is also a 1 bedroom, we got $3,500. The only reason why we got $3,500 because the first floor had the garden apartment with the backyard, $500 more for the backyard.
And you was like,
And
oh, okay.
so now I got the wake up call.
Yeah.
Now I'm cash flowing $7,500 a month.
Wow.
And now my mortgage was only $940.14. I knew it like the back of my head. $940.14.
You was like, okay, y'all can put that on auto pay now.
But I had to. It's funny when you get when your back hits the wall and your survival mechanisms, and you're forced to kind of like think things through.
Right.
Because I wasn't thinking like an investor back then. You know, now it's a whole different story. But that mindset, you know, and just by moving out of the property, then I said, wait a minute, this is what I got out of this property. But then guess what we need to do with the others? We need to rent them out. And then I talked to my brother and my sister. I said, look, you got to rent out the Florida property. We'll get the Virginia. We got to do the one in Jamaica. The one here in Florida. Like, we just started renting them all out because now the proof is in the pudding.
Right.
You know? And
wow, that's crazy. Go. Okay, so real estate's going well for you.
Yeah.
Did you end up keeping all those properties, you and your siblings?
All right, so great question. Now, going back to estate planning, right? My stepfather, the only thing he said was, I do. He never put a dime into the property. Remember where the capital came from in the beginning.
Right. From you, now, actually, yes.
Right? But because he said I do, and he married my mom, when my mother passed away, he now inherits half of the estate because of New York City or New York State law.
Well, they usually...
And that was a bitter pill to swallow. Bitter pill to swallow. You know?
Yeah, that's
so he kind of forced the sale of the home. I didn't want to sell it. Obviously, I'm cash flowing.
Yeah.
But he wanted to cash out because he's 70-something years old. And because he's in his 70s and he realized it's time, he was like, look, I want to get the cash now because he didn't have a retirement plan.
Right.
So that was his retirement plan. That's his cash cow.
Could you guys have gotten a mortgage to buy him out? Or it wasn't possible?
Great question. So this is why, you know, as a real estate broker, people understand when parents leave their properties for their kids, whose name is the property in? It's in the parents' name.
Right.
Who got the mortgage? It was the parents.
Right.
So if you don't have remember, you cannot get equity in a home or get a refinance or a HELOC, home equity line of credit. I couldn't do any of that. You know why?
Why?
Because the property was in my mother's name.
So now you had to go through the probate.
It wasn't in my name.
Right.
Let me talk about So this is where you come into play.
Right.
Because at that time, Sabine, I was in the transition of, because of my stepfather, forcing the sale, and I needed to find an attorney to help me with the probate.
Yeah.
And that's why I shared my real life story, because I really needed an attorney to help me with this probate situation. But I'm learning something about probate. And there's nothing not against any attorney.
No, tell the truth,
I'm keeping it
David.
real.
Tell them the truth.
I'm going to tell the truth right here. You know, and I'm not going to name this attorney. Anyway, I would be nice. So I think what I'm learning about probate is that I think some of these attorneys know when you're desperate. And when you're desperate because you have to sell, you do desperate measures, right? And because these attorneys, not all, right? You're the good one. You're the exception to the rule. Know that you're in a desperate situation, because I didn't know, one, any house over $1 million in New York City is considered mansion tax. That's one. Two, probate, Uncle Sam, takes about 30 to 35% in taxes. I did not know this. See, people profit off of your ignorance, guys. Right?
Probably back then the estate tax level was low. It's probably like $2-3 million. So if she died with that much property, she probably had an estate tax.
Oh yes, trust me. I got to know Uncle Sam very well. Okay, I'll go leave that alone, right? And then the attorney, because they knew we were desperate, this particular attorney, damn, I really feel, anyway.
No, don't say
she
or her name.
Can you imagine this attorney said to take on my case to sell it? She said it was going to cost $100,000.
Are you serious?
I will show you receipts after we get off of this, just so you can see.
That's what you paid, David? That's what you had to pay?
No, Mama Tumbo voice. No. I mean, look, I may not know a lot of things, but I'm from the hood, and I know when I'm getting suckered, right? And I said, okay, $100,000 to sell a house to take on our case? So I said, no. This is where now, thank God, I built relationships with investors who had attorneys that deal with these type of scenarios.
Right, okay.
And thank God, man, I got an attorney that helped me out, and was able to deal with my situation, because in full transparency, it was not an easy situation. This is where brother, sister,
and stepfather
family, they start doing this because people start seeing dollar signs, right? Everybody want to start having their hand in the cookie jar. And because my stepfather was married and he had a son that was outside of the marriage, guess all of a sudden he started sniffing around. Everybody's seeing dollar signs.
Right.
And I'm like, my mother isn't even fresh in the ground yet, and you guys already fighting. And
this is what happens. This is what, people need to understand. Things may seem like everyone gets along. Things are great. But once there's money and you're no longer in the picture, oh my God, the things that happen.
As Lauryn Hill said, it's funny how money changes situation. Miscommunication leads to incarceration.
All right, David, with the hip hop today, you got all the quotes.
I'm saying, I'm on
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's obviously it's unfortunate, right? We're obviously going to get into what she could have done.
What she could have done.
She could have done. So let's skip to that. So you are in real estate. You're doing that. You had this whole inheritance, and now you've gone through the system and all that stuff. You've seen how that played out, and at some point you decide insurance. Tell me about that. So
how that happened, and everything happens organically, right? It just happens when it happens, right? Just like when I became a tutor, I didn't expect or wanted to become a tutor, but somebody saw that in me.
Yeah.
Same thing with real estate. I was technically in real estate before I got my license in 2013. If you really think about it, right?
Absolutely.
If I really think about it. And I believe that, God led me to do real estate. So to handle, because I had to negotiate and handle selling the house, the house in Park Slope. And I sold it for the highest price, all cash deal,
nice.
Right? Paid on the commission, right?
Right.
That went to me. So I look at the, when shout out to my man Nico, he washes my car, and Nico Car Wash, if you ever Google him, he does a great job. The car wash comes to you.
Nice.
So I washed my car outside, and all of a sudden, You know, because every time you watch, because the car wash, those, you know, you see those
Yeah.
mobile vans, and they wash in the car, because I didn't have time to go to a car wash. Like, it was too much, and I like my car a certain way. So next thing you know, I'm washing the car, and people are like, wow, man, that car looks spick and span, you know? And they're like, who's the guy that does the car? And I said, oh, he got his card. So I went to go get his card, and I also, because of the networking opportunity, I said, oh, I also do real estate, right? And I gave them my card, and to find out that she was a life insurance agent, or broker, should I say.
Okay.
Life insurance broker, because I'm learning the difference between an agent and broker.
Yeah.
Just like in mortgages, you have a mortgage banker who works for one bank, then you have a mortgage broker who works for several banks.
Right.
So it's the
And
same
then,
thing in real
go ahead. Sorry, you say it.
It's the same thing in life insurance. I didn't know all of this, right? I'm learning this now. She's a broker that represents multiple companies. So I said, okay. And she said, have you heard about or know about living benefits? And I looked at her and I said, no, I never heard about living benefits. Can you explain what that is? And then she said something to me that was so powerful. It hit me like right here. She said, living benefits pays you while you have insurance, while you are sick, while you're alive. So if you get sick, think about right now, we're in COVID, in a pandemic, and people on respirators. My aunt's are RN. I got a lot of family members in the nursing business. And man, with the stories they were telling me about, you know, patients 3 months, 6 months,
in the hospital,
long time on the respirator. Do you think, now think about when you're sick, you got a mortgage, you got bills to pay, you can't work. So who's paying these bills when you're sick?
Right.
So this is what living benefits does. And then it automatically triggered something in me, right? Because it brought me back to when my mother was sick with cancer.
And the bills.
Right?
Wow.
And
I didn't even know about living benefits.
Mother would have known about living benefits, because my mother had $1 million policy, right?
Oh, she did. Okay.
Yes. Thank God.
Thank God.
Right. Right. And when she was sick, because it took, unfortunately, the cancer, it took about 1 year and 7 months. She literally, in 1 year and 7 months, she just shriveled up, right? And during that 1 year and 7 months was the hardest, toughest time. Because remember, I had to pay for 5 mortgages.
Oh, right.
5 property taxes, 5 insurances. I wasn't making the money that I'm making today back then. You understand?
Right.
I wasn't prepared for that. Right?
Yeah.
So that's where all the ingenuity came, and had to figure out how to keep those properties from not going into foreclosure.
Right.
But if my mother would have known about living benefits, she would have been able to get the money, because she had cancer, breast cancer. She'd have been able to get maybe $900,000 up front. That would have took care of all the bills that I was dealing with.
Right.
Paid off some of the mortgages. I would have had some breathing room.
Right.
To this day, Sabine, I have high blood pressure because of that.
Really? That's crazy.
It was stressful.
It's amazing,
man.
how much stress affects you physically.
I wouldn't wish that on nobody, not even my worst enemy. The amount of pressure that I had, because all I kept saying is that I'm not going to let my mother's properties go into foreclosure. That hard work and sacrifice is not going to go wasted. I'm not going to let that happen to me, you know? But to try to maintain that at that time on a $30,000, I had to, me, my brother, my sister, the whole family, we had to pool
to
our
pay
resources together to pay these, or it wasn't going to happen.
Wow.
I said, you have 2 choices, guys. Either we pay it and we keep it, or we don't pay it and we lose it.
Yeah. Wow. She was a superwoman. She was doing all that on her own.
Well, thank God she had that policy, but she did not have a policy with living benefits. So if my mother would have had that, a lot of the stress that I had to deal with. So I thought about living benefits. I said, okay, we in COVID right now. Currently, I'm the breadwinner in my family. And I said, what happens if I get sick?
Right.
And I catch COVID, and it affects all of us different. Some are asymptomatic, some are mild, and some are severe. I don't know how it's going to affect me, but
Right.
seeing what I saw with all those dead bodies out of Kings County Hospital parked in a refrigerated truck,
Right.
seeing how it was in New York at the time when we were at the epicenter, I said, whoa, I got to check my policy for real. So I looked at my policy because this lady talked about living benefits, and I wanted to see if I had that.
Right.
No, I didn't.
Wow.
And the worst time to know about something, being like we had all these floods in New York with homeowners insurance, and all these people got flooded out, right?
Yeah.
And then to find out they didn't have flood insurance. So who pays that bill?
They do.
You understand? That's the worst time when you're in the most need, when you're in the worst need of your life, or when you need it the most, should I say.
And
now you find out you don't have it. I said, no. Thank you for letting me know about living benefits.
Right.
We got Google today. When I'm on computer, started looking about living benefits. I said, oh. And then she said, I can help you get a policy with living benefits. And then that's when I got a policy, $1 million policy with living benefits. And I said, now, if anything, God forbid, now I got actually 2, 3. Now I leave that alone, because I want to leave a legacy. And people don't know that, if something happens to me now, I know I can sleep at night knowing if anything, heart attack, stroke, cancer, whatever, my family will be okay. If they can't depend on me and I'm in the hospital for an extended amount of time.
Right. Wow. That's super powerful. That's really super powerful. Thank you for sharing that, because I didn't know about living benefits. I know about policies that have those features, but I didn't know you can get that. Is that you can get that on any sort of, Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you transition from that to being like, I'm going to sell insurance now?
Oh, so because I was so grateful that somebody shared this powerful knowledge with me, and in real estate, I'm used to giving referrals. So I started referring her everywhere I go to. Well, first I had to take care of my family.
Yeah.
I said, guys, you guys don't have living benefits? You guys got to get a policy with living benefits, okay? So and then she was like, David, all those referrals that you're giving me, you know what? You should end up being an agent. You should be an agent. And I was like, me, an agent?
Yeah.
Because I'm in real estate. I have my blinders on. I'm not focused on.
Yeah.
But then she's like, on average, the average policy is about $1,000 per person or more. That's the average. So I'm like, then the numbers started, wait, if I refer 10 people, that's $10,000. I think sign me up.
Right.
You understand? That's the average policy. Because there's policies that's worth way more than that. But I'm saying that's the average, right?
Okay.
So then I was like, oh, wow. So this stuff really works, And right now we're in a pandemic where a lot of people don't know about living benefits and knowing the right types of policies they have to have. And I said, you know what? This is just another extra stream of income. But then I started doing more research in real estate and, Zillow, right? So when I was at Compass, and I remember when I was at Compass Real Estate, and I remember the CEO was like, Zillow was our enemy. And at the time, I'm like, why you keep saying Zillow is our enemy?
Right.
Because he's like, don't put your listings on Zillow, put it through Compass website. And now I understand, because now I see that Compass has now gotten their broker's license.
You mean Zillow?
All 50. Oh, Zillow has gotten their broker's license in all 50 states.
I heard about this.
So I started thinking about it. I said, let me think about this. So if Zillow's getting their broker's license in 50 states, so I remember Blockbuster. Blockbuster had a 90% market share. Then a little old company by the name of Netflix came around, pushed them out the way.
Totally out the way. Decimated.
Then you had the taxi cab, TLC. They dominated the whole market. And then a little old company by the name of Uber came.
Right.
Pushed them out the way.
Writings on the wall.
Then you had the small businesses in the malls. And then a little old company by the name of Amazon came. And now slowly pushing them out the way. Am I naive to think because Zillow has now gotten their broker's license,
Right.
that they're not going to try to come for all brokers all across America.
Yep.
And they got a huge war chest.
Not only
Everybody
that, they have
goes
all
on.
the data. They've been collecting data for how many years now? And
They leveraged us.
They sure did.
They leveraged us and used us like no other. Man, listen. Because we had to sign exclusive right to sell agreements. And on those exclusive right to sell agreements, you have to upload that document. And Zillow bought Street Easy. And Zillow brought Trulia. So who's Zillow competition right now? There's only one competitor, and that's Realtor.com. And you'll know eventually.
They'll probably do the same thing now that they get hip to the business model.
So I said, okay, I see they coming for me. I mean, right now, I said, all agents, please eat while you can.
Yeah.
Eat while you can.
And make a contingency plan.
What is that? What, 2 to 3 years from now? The same thing. I see it. I see the writing before it happens. So in this pandemic, people who've lost businesses 30 years, 40 years in the business, everybody right now has to learn how to pivot. You got to learn how to pivot. And you got to learn, like Jay-Z said, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is... You got to right? You got to reinvent yourself. The only constant thing in life is change. Either you're changing with the time, or you're going to be left behind.
Absolutely.
And I said, okay. So that was one reason. The other thing is, with my real estate license, I'm only allowed to do real estate in New York State. I can only allow to have agents under my license in New York State.
Right.
But with life insurance, I can have business in all 50 states. I can have agents in all 50 states. And mind the way, I am hiring in case anybody wants to get their life insurance license, and we will pay for it. I will pay for it. You have my word on that, okay? And then on top of that, residuals. Imagine when I sold a house in 2013 or 2014 or 15, once that transaction was done, it's over.
That's it.
I'm back to square one. It's like you eat what you kill. Right? You got to constantly do it. But imagine now if I would have built an insurance business where work that I did in 2013, any policy, if I was selling policies back then, back in 2013, I would still every year get residual income on that every year. And then I'm like, okay, I have a 5-year-old son. And I said, you know what? I can leave him a real estate business, but what happens if he doesn't like real estate or doesn't want to do real estate? Then the business really doesn't make any money for him. Right? It's like when parents leave restaurants for their kids or whatever.
They don't want to be in a restaurant.
They don't want to be in a restaurant.
Right.
So the money, then they end up selling the business. But with this, I can build a book of business for him. So by the time he's 18, the book of business that I built with all that residual income, do you think those people are going to stop paying those policies?
Nope.
Even after I'm gone. So guess what? That will be another source. That's me giving
another stream
him
of income
a source. Correct. Wow. And making him be a trust fund kid.
Wow. David, this was such a great conversation. We covered so many different areas, but you are like you have like all the experience when it comes to legacy and planning. You totally understand every single aspect of it, and the good and the bad, right? There are some things you benefited from and some things you didn't, but now you can use all of that to really educate people and really, help other families. That's awesome.
My failures, and I'm learning, because I used to be ashamed of my story in full transparency, but I'm learning that failure is first attempt in learning, right? And because of my failures, I hope anybody paid attention, that will be your blessing, right? So you can learn and not make the mistakes that I made,
right?
And I made some big ones, but it made me a better and stronger person to this day. So I can share that testimony to help others who may be going. I just got a phone call from because I'm also a real estate instructor, in case anybody didn't know. And one of my students literally just called me the other week and said, my dad just passed away. And He's like, I need a probate attorney. Guess who I referred, right?
Thank you.
And I said, you know, and I just felt, and I'm like, man, you know, this is like the same cycle, and I just see it all the time.
Yeah,
because
over
there's
and
really
over.
only four main reasons why somebody sells a house, right? They either sell it because of divorce, because they have two incomes, now becoming one income,
Right.
and they now can't handle the mortgage payments and the overhead, right? Then it's sickness, if you're in the hospital. The other one is death, and the other one is job loss. And look what just transpired in this whole year.
Right.
Now, out of the four reasons that people sell a house, that we know, real estate, credit, life insurance, stocks, these are the foundational pieces of wealth.
Right.
But how many of us know about it, first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
We don't know everything about it. But out of the four reasons why somebody sells, two of those, sickness and death, can be mitigated or solved with a life insurance policy.
Ooh,
to keep the properties, so that, because I had a nurse call me that I helped her buy a house in Long Island, and she bought the house for her and her three kids because they wanted a better education, right? Then she got glaucoma in her eyes, where now she became legally blind. So she can no longer administer needles and medicine, so she had to resign from her job.
Wow.
She went on disability. She was making over six figures to now being on disability, barely making enough to get by. So guess what? She couldn't handle the mortgage payments, so guess what she called me? David, I need to sell my house. But if she would have had living benefits,
it'd have been taken care of.
Then she would have been able to pay off the mortgage, to keep the house, so that the kids don't have to start all over and pass that generational wealth down.
Yeah, you don't have to lose it. You don't have to waste it and spend it down. There could be a contingency plan in place so that, you know, you can leave the legacy that you want to live.
Correct.
Awesome.
A lot of people are house rich but cash poor.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. David, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us.
Yes,
thank you with the passion and the attention that you brought to the conversation. Where can people find you if they want to keep up with you?
So you can find me, literally, you can Google my name, David Germain, David. Then my last name, a lot of people spell the J, but it's Germain. My Instagram is proven, PROVEN _winners, WINNERS. You can find me there. I have links in my bio. You can definitely reach me, and I could definitely help you, whether it be on the real estate side or on the insurance side.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I'll put your information in the description. I wanted to do a lightning round, but literally I might run out of batteries. So we'll do it real quick. Yeah, we'll do it real quick. So I'm going to say some words. I call it right quick. And I'm going to say some words and you just tell me what comes to mind, right?
Cool.
Try to keep them short. So the first one is happiness.
God.
Family.
Love. Legacy.
Awesome. Fun.
Inner joy. You have to choose to be happy.
Right. And the last one is don't mess with.
Don't mess. Wow, don't mess with my family, man. That's pretty much it. You know how that get down. Yeah.
Yep, he came from the real Brooklyn. Don't get it twisted.
The old school, man. I gotta calm that old side of me. I gotta get that old side of me off of me. Man. Changed up now.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, David. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep on doing what you're doing, man. Keep on doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for watching this episode. I really appreciate you being here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Your likes really help my channel, helps my videos, and hit the notification bell so you know when I put out more content. Also, please comment down below. I want to know what you think about this video. I want to know your thoughts, your opinions. I appreciate them, and maybe I'll use it in another video. Also, finally, you can find me on IG at Sabine _the Purpose Lawyer, and also on all podcast outlets as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. Please don't forget to use your common sense. And if you don't have any, please feel free to use mine.